I spent years trying to be her sister, but she spent years trying to prove I didn't belong in my own home. When my dad married Susan, I was 14, trying to navigate freshman year at Westlake High in Austin, Texas. Susan brought along Maya, who was just 6 months younger than me. On paper, it looked like the perfect modern blended family. My dad was happy for the first time since my mom passed away, and I genuinely wanted a sister. I imagined sharing clothes, talking about guys, and staying up late whispering secrets. But Maya had a completely different script in mind. The first hint of trouble started the week we moved into our new house. I had spent months saving up my allowance and babysitting money to buy a vintage leather jacket from a local boutique on Congress Avenue. It was my prized possession, the one thing that made me feel confident when my anxiety spiked. 2 days after boxing everything up, I found it sitting on the floor of Maya's closet, crumpled under a pile of dirty laundry. When I confronted her, she didn't even look up from her phone. She just shrugged and said she thought it belonged to the house now. Honestly, I tried to brush it off. I told myself she was just adjusting to a massive life change. Her biological dad had walked out on her family years ago, and she was suddenly sharing her mother with my dad. I forced myself to be patient. I let her take the bigger bedroom with the bay window. I stayed quiet when Susan started rewriting our family holiday traditions, replacing my late mom's famous Thanksgiving pecan pie with her own recipes. I kept the peace because I loved my dad, and he looked so relieved to have a full house again. But my patience only seemed to fuel Maya's insecurity. As we hit our junior year, the subtle snubs turned into a quiet, calculated competition. It wasn't a loud, screaming rivalry. It was the way she would conveniently forget to tell me that dinner plans had changed, leaving me sitting alone at a restaurant while the 4 of them dined somewhere else. It was the way she would subtly mimic my style, my hobbies, and even my friends, only to act like she did it first. The real breaking point started with the varsity track team. I had been running hurdles since middle school. Track was my sanctuary, the one place where I wasn't just the grieving daughter or the accommodating stepsister. I was just fast. Maya had never shown an interest in running, but right before junior year tryouts, she suddenly joined the team. At first, I tried to be supportive. I offered to train with her at the school track on weekends. But Maya didn't want to train with me. She wanted to beat me. She started telling the coach that I was skipping mandatory stretching sessions, which wasn't true. She began whispering to our teammates that I only got the varsity captain spot because my dad donated new equipment to the athletic department. Slowly, the atmosphere in the locker room shifted. My friends stopped sitting next to me on the bus to away meets. I felt isolated in the one place I used to feel safe. Then came the night of the regional qualifiers. I had been preparing for this meet for 10 months. My dad promised he would be in the front row of the bleachers to watch me run. But 20 minutes before my event, my phone buzzed in the locker room. It was a text from my dad saying he couldn't make it because he had to rush Maya to the urgent care clinic. My heart dropped. I ran the race with a heavy chest, barely qualifying for the finals. The moment it was over, I grabbed my bag and Ubered straight to the clinic, terrified that something awful had happened to her. When I walked through the sliding glass doors of the waiting room, I froze. Maya was sitting on the examination table, laughing and drinking a smoothie, while Susan adjusted a pristine, unblemished wrap around her ankle. There was no swelling. No bruising. That's when I looked down at Maya's gym bag on the floor and saw something sticking out of the side pocket that made my blood run cold. It was my car keys. Not just any keys, but the spare set I kept hidden in my bedroom drawer for emergencies. The exact set I had spent an hour frantically looking for before leaving for the track meet, assuming I had just misplaced them in my rush. Seeing them tucked neatly into the mesh pocket of Maya's bag felt like a physical blow to my chest. At that point, I realized everything. She hadn't twisted her ankle during her warm-ups like she told my dad. She had taken my keys to delay me, and when that didn't stop me from getting to the meet, she staged an injury to pull my dad away from the finish line. It wasn't about her ankle at all. It was about making sure I didn't have anyone in the stands cheering for me. My dad looked up, his face lined with worry when he saw me standing in the doorway. He immediately asked how my race went, but before I could answer, Susan chimed in, talking about how terrifying it was when Maya collapsed on the track. I looked directly at Maya. She didn't flinch. She just took another sip of her smoothie and gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. It was a look that said, "I won, and there is nothing you can do about it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to dump her gym bag onto the clinic floor and show my dad the stolen keys. But I looked at my dad's exhausted eyes, and something inside me told me to wait. If I threw a tantrum right there, I would look like the jealous, bitter stepsister attacking an injured girl. I took a deep breath, forced a calm smile, and told them I was just glad she was okay. If you've ever dealt with sibling rivalry or a blended family dynamic like this, let me know in the comments how you handled it. When we got home, the tension in the house was suffocating. I walked upstairs, went straight into my room, and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall for hours. I was hurt, but more than that, I was angry. Maya's insecurity was no longer just a minor annoyance. It was actively chipping away at my life, my relationships, and my peace of mind. The next few months of our junior year became a Cold War. I stopped trying to include Maya. I stopped offering her rides, stopped inviting her to sit with my friends at lunch, and stopped pretending that we were a happy family when it was just the two of us. I built a wall around myself, focusing entirely on my grades and my training. Maya, however, took my silence as a challenge. Since she couldn't get under my skin at home anymore, she shifted her focus to school. She started hanging out with the crowd I had known since middle school, slowly ingratiating herself into my social circle. She would host movie nights at our house on weekends when she knew I had to work my shift at the local coffee shop downtown. Slowly but surely, my friends stopped texting our group chat. They started a new one without me. By the time senior year rolled around, the isolation was complete. I was a ghost in my own high school, watching my stepsister live the life I had spent years building. But I kept telling myself that high school wasn't forever. I just needed to survive until graduation, get into a good college, and leave Austin behind. I applied to several schools, but my dream was the University of Washington in Seattle. It was far away, beautiful, and had an incredible track program. I spent weeks perfecting my application essay, poured my heart into it, and finally hit submit in November. 2 months later, the admissions decisions were scheduled to be released online. I came home from track practice on a Tuesday afternoon, my heart racing with anticipation. I logged on to the family computer in the study, opened the university portal, and holding my breath, clicked the status link. The screen loaded, and my heart shattered. "We regret to inform you." I sat there in total shock, tears blurring my vision. My GPA was well above their average, my athletic times were competitive, and my counselor had assured me I was a shoo-in. I couldn't understand what went wrong. Desperate for answers, I scrolled down to the bottom of the rejection page where they listed the official documents received. That is when I noticed the upload timestamp for my official high school transcript. It had been submitted at 11:45 p.m. on the final night of the deadline. But I had submitted my application at 4 p.m. Someone had logged into my portal hours after I went to sleep, deleted my actual transcript, and uploaded a corrupted, unreadable file in its place. I wish I had stopped asking questions right then. But what I discovered when I checked the computer's browser history changed everything. The browser history didn't just show the university portal. It showed Maya's personal email logged in at 11:42 p.m., just 3 minutes before the corrupted file was uploaded. She hadn't just tried to outrun me on the track or steal my friends. She was trying to steal my entire future. I sat in the dark study, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears on my face. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the mouse. A part of me wanted to storm upstairs, kick her door open, and demand to know how she could be so cruel. But as I stared at the timestamp on the screen, a strange, cold calmness washed over me. I realized that reacting with anger was exactly what Maya wanted. She wanted me to lose my mind, to scream, to make myself look like the unstable one in front of our parents. I took a screenshot of the browser history, downloaded the login IP data, and saved everything to a secure flash drive. I wasn't going to play her game anymore. The next morning, I bypassed my parents entirely. I went straight to our school counselor, Mrs. Gable. I showed her the proof of the corrupted file and the unauthorized login from our home computer during a time I was documented as asleep. Mrs. Gable was horrified. Because it involved academic tampering and identity verification, she immediately contacted the University of Washington admissions office on my behalf. They agreed to review my actual transcript, but the process would take weeks. In the meantime, I had to live under the same roof as the person who tried to ruin my life. I acted completely normal. When Susan asked to dinner if I had heard back from Seattle, I simply shrugged and said I was still waiting. I caught Maya watching me from across the table, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She was expecting me to be devastated. She was expecting me to cry in my room. My silence was driving her crazy. 2 weeks later, the university portal updated. I was officially accepted, and they even offered me a partial athletic scholarship. I didn't tell a soul. I kept the acceptance letter locked in my car's glove box. I wanted to enjoy my victory in absolute secrecy while I figured out my next move. But Maya wasn't done. Seeing that I wasn't broken, she decided to push the envelope even further. Spring break was approaching, and our high school was hosting the annual senior gala, a massive formal dinner at a hotel downtown. It was the biggest event of the year. I had saved up for months to buy a beautiful emerald green silk dress. It was hanging on the back of my closet door, completely unaltered and ready for Friday night. On Thursday afternoon, I came home early from a dentist appointment. The house was quiet. As I walked up the stairs, I heard a strange sound coming from my bedroom. It sounded like fabric tearing. I crept down the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs, and pushed my bedroom door open an inch. Maya was standing in the center of my room. In her right hand, she held a pair of heavy fabric shears. My emerald dress was draped over her arm, and she was deliberately cutting the delicate silk straps right at the seams. But it wasn't just the dress that caught my attention. On my nightstand lay my late mother's pearl necklace, the only piece of jewelry I had left of hers, and Maya was reaching for it. That's when I realized she had been planning something much worse for the night of the gala. I didn't yell. I didn't rush into the room to grab the shears from her hands. Instead, I pulled out my phone, stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, and recorded her through the crack in the door. I caught everything on video, Maya slicing through the silk straps of my dress, tossing it onto the floor, and then casually picking up my mom's pearl necklace, sliding it into the front pocket of her hoodie. Seeing her touch the one thing I had left of my mother made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to stay perfectly still. When she finished, she checked her reflection in my mirror, brushed her hair back, and walked toward the door. I slipped into the bathroom down the hall just in time to hear her footsteps walk down the stairs and out to the garage. The moment the garage door slammed shut, I ran back into my room. I picked up the ruined dress, my chest aching. But then I looked at the video on my phone. Maya thought she was playing a game of subtle sabotage, but she had just handed me the ultimate proof of her malice. She had no idea I had caught her on camera. The next evening was the senior gala. The house was chaotic as everyone got ready. Susan was downstairs helping Maya zip up her expensive designer gown, while my dad was fixing his tie in the living room. I stayed up in my room until the very last minute. I hadn't replaced the green dress. Instead, I wore a simple black slip dress I had borrowed from a track teammate weeks ago. It wasn't flashy, but it fit perfectly. When I walked down the stairs, my dad smiled proudly, telling me I looked beautiful. Maya was standing near the front door, wearing her perfect dress and holding a corsage. Around her neck, shining brightly under the foyer lights, was my mother's pearl necklace. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my simple black dress, and a smug, satisfied look crossed her face. She genuinely thought she had stripped me of my confidence. She thought I was wearing a borrowed dress because I had no other choice. "Ready to go, girls?" my dad asked, grabbing his car keys. "Almost," I said, my voice completely calm and steady. "Before we leave, I actually have a graduation gift for Maya. I wanted to show everyone before we head to the hotel." Susan smiled, looking touched. "Oh, that's so sweet of you, sweetie." Maya's smile instantly vanished. Her posture stiffened, her eyes darting to mine with a sudden flash of panic. I walked over to the living room TV, plugged my phone into the media console via the HDMI cable, and turned on the screen. "I think you guys are really going to love this memory," I said, holding the remote. Maya took a step toward the television, her face turning pale. "We're going to be late," she stammered, her voice shaking. "We should just go." But my dad was already looking at the screen, curious. I pressed play. But my dad was already looking at the screen, curious. I pressed play. The video filled the 65-inch screen. The audio was crystal clear. The entire living room filled with the sharp, sickening sound of fabric tearing as Maya sliced through my emerald dress on camera. The room went dead silent. Nobody breathed. Then, the video showed Maya reaching onto my nightstand, picking up the pearl necklace she was currently wearing, and hiding it in her pocket. I turned off the TV. The silence in the room was deafening. My dad slowly turned around, his face completely pale, his eyes moving from the blank screen straight to the pearls resting on Maya's neck. I wish I could say she tried to deny it. But what she did next proved exactly how far she was willing to go to destroy our family. Maya didn't break down in tears. She didn't apologize. Instead, her face hardened, and she looked directly at my dad. "She has everything," Maya whispered, her voice trembling with a sudden, sharp anger. "You look at her like she's perfect. Mom looks at her like she's the golden child. I had to fight just to get noticed in this house, and she gets a front row seat to my entire life being handed to her." Susan gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes darting between her daughter and the TV screen. "Maya," my dad said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet octave I had never heard before. "Take off the necklace. Right now." Maya ripped the pearls off her neck so hard a few of the delicate links strained, and she threw them onto the coffee table. She turned on her heel, stormed up the stairs, and slammed her bedroom door so hard the framed photos in the hallway rattled. Susan immediately looked at my dad, her hands shaking. "Mark, please, she's just under so much pressure with graduation. She didn't mean it, she's just insecure. She defaced my daughter's property and stole her late mother's jewelry." "Susan," my dad interrupted, his voice steady but laced with a profound disappointment. "This isn't pressure. This is cruel." I didn't say a word. I walked over to the coffee table, carefully picked up my mother's pearls, and held them tight in my palm. The cool weight of the stones felt like a shield. I looked at my dad, told him I was going to the gala with my friends, and walked out the front door into the cool evening air. If you enjoy emotional real-life stories and want to see how this all unravels, don't forget to subscribe. That night at the hotel downtown, I didn't think about Maya once. I danced with my teammates, laughed until my stomach hurt, and celebrated the end of high school. For the first time in 4 years, the invisible weight on my shoulders was completely gone. I didn't need a designer dress to feel like I belonged. When I got home around midnight, the house was dark, but my dad was sitting alone at the kitchen island, a glass of water in front of him. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes tired but incredibly soft. He apologized to me. He apologized for not seeing the subtle exclusion, for missing the signs of Maya's jealousy, and for letting me feel isolated in my own home. He told me that he and Susan had agreed that Maya would be starting therapy immediately, and that she would be working over the summer to pay me back for the ruined green dress. But the biggest surprise came the following week. My dad helped me pack up my room 2 months earlier than planned. He had spoken with the housing department at the University of Washington, and they agreed to let me move into the freshman dorms early for the summer athletic training program. The morning I left for Seattle, Maya was standing by the stairs. She looked exhausted, her usual defensive posture replaced by something hollow and small. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, not looking me in the eye. "About the dress. And the college portal." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt a deep, quiet pity. She had spent so much time trying to tear down my life that she hadn't built anything genuine of her own. "I hope you find peace, Maya," I said honestly. "But I'm protecting mine now." Looking back now, that summer in Seattle changed everything for me. I flourished on the track team, made friends who valued me for exactly who I was, and built a life based on my own hard work. Maya and I don't talk anymore, and that's okay. Sometimes, the best way to handle a toxic family dynamic isn't to fight back with malice, but to simply succeed so loudly that their noise doesn't matter anymore. Jealousy destroys relationships faster than honesty ever could, but sometimes, protecting your peace is the bravest thing you can do.